Welcome to the eHunter podcast, where we talk about all things hunting. If you enjoy hunting tips, tactics, stories, and entertainment, this is the podcast for you. Make sure and subscribe to the podcast as well as to our YouTube channel. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I got Chad with me again. What's going on, Chad?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for joining me again. This is going to be a fun podcast, everybody. We're gonna turn the tables a little bit, put a little bit more stress on me, and see if I can answer some questions. And truth be told, we're going to lean on each other and talk about some stuff, but hopefully be able to answer a lot of questions. If you guys saw the title, we're going to be talking optics today. And so the reason we're talking about optics is now is the time. If you've got hunts coming up this fall, I mean, honestly, you might even be past that time, but really now is the time to be getting those optics that you need for your upcoming hunts, getting used to them, getting the feel for them, maybe seeing what else you need to add to it. So anyways, if you guys are needing optics, definitely reach out. We've got some connections that we can hook you up with through either Optics Planet or through Vortex Optics. But yeah, just let us know if you guys need some help with deciding what optics that you need. And hopefully throughout this podcast, as Chad and I chat about different optics and, you know, different options that are out there, that we'll be able to answer some of those questions that you have. And obviously, before we get started, we do want to thank Vortex Optics. They've been a long-time partner of us over here at eHunter. My goodness, I can't even talk. But we're grateful for them. We're grateful for the relationship that we have with them. They've been so good to us for a very long time. And so just want to give a shout out to Sawyer and the guys over there. We appreciate you guys for all of your support for us here at eHunter. And Chad and I are pretty much Vortex guys. You got a lot of Vortex stuff, don't you?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, aside from a few rifle scopes, I mean, all of my binos and spotting scopes are all Vortex.
Yeah. I'm pretty much, yeah. I think most of my stuff now is Vortex. I am going to change things up a little bit this year. And in fact, I'm preaching to the choir here. I need to get some optics. Going to switch out one of my pairs of binos and switch over to some Swarovski 15 power binoculars. Just to save myself a little bit, like on those late season rifle hunts. You really don't need a spotting scope if you got some 15 power binoculars, but we'll probably get into that today as we talk about different binoculars. But so that's going to be a change that I have. And if you guys have been listening to the podcast and watching some of the videos that I've put up recently, you'll see that I talked about that. I'm excited about that. I'm excited to try them. A lot of the guys that I've hunted with in the past use those Swaro 15s. They're great. In fact, I got a buddy that's selling some right now if he still has them for sale. In fact, if he's listening, reach out to me. I'm going to ask you some questions about that. We might have to work out a little bit of a deal. But anyways.
There you go.
So sidetrack a little bit. So yeah, we're going to do a little bit different. Chad's going to, kind of ask me some questions here tonight and or today, whenever you're listening to this podcast. And we're going to go through this and, again, hopefully answer some questions that you guys have about optics and questions that we both have and work through this. So we'll probably be looking online and answering some questions that way and just lean on some of the knowledge that we have. So Chad, let's take it away. Let's start off with binoculars and talk about binoculars.
Yeah, so we figured, we were talking about optics, and truth be told, every time I'm looking at optics, I always call Taryn. So I'm like, well, let's, you know far more about these than I do. So what I did is I kind of put together some stuff that, I've asked in the past. There's a lot of things I still don't know. I'm still learning about it. So I figure we can kind of go through a few details and kind of get maybe in the weeds a little bit on a few things that, people may have questions on or don't know the right people to ask or have a hard time finding it. So,
yeah.
But yeah, if we want to start with binos, I think those are, like you just mentioned, there's different powers.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some things that you look for, when you're buying let's say you're new to hunting and you want to start off. What do you think would be like the first set of binos you would buy? Like the most versatile, best bang for your buck that you're going to be able to use on the most hunts. Someone who's doesn't want to spend a lot of money right up front until they really know this is something they're wanting to get into. What do you think the direction is they should go?
So I'll answer that more of as a Western hunter. So because we do actually have quite a few guys that are on the eastern side of the U.S. that follow us as well. And on the eastern side, It's so thick and you really can't get up on top of a mountain and really do a lot of glassing up there. So I'd probably do a lower power binocular out there. So from a Western standpoint, it really can be very daunting because there's so many different powers. There's so many different sizes. Some of them have different, things inside of them. Some have rangefinders inside of them. Some have, what can tell you the windage. Some can, do all of your algorithm, your dope chart in them. Some of these things are pretty crazy nowadays. So we'll probably stay away from those a little bit. And I mean, we might get into those here in a minute. But to answer your question, for someone that's just barely getting into hunting, this is what I would recommend. Really look at what you want to hunt. So, if you're wanting to hunt mainly big game, so elk, deer, maybe some bear, stuff like that in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, there's a couple different options. Now, you're probably not going to want to go out and buy 2 or 3 sets of binoculars. That just breaks the bank really quick. Where we've had our relationship with Vortex, it's allowed me to have a few sets, but for someone that doesn't want to do that, I would actually recommend they do exactly what you have, Chad. I would go a middle range binocular, a middle range magnification, which would be like around a 12, and then get a good quality. I'm not saying that you have to go with the highest quality, so I'll use Vortex as an example. They have the lower end binoculars like the Crossfires and the Diamondbacks. They're really their lower end, cheaper versions. Then they have their upper echelon. That's the word I always use. It's probably not the right word, but they have their Razors and their Razors UHDs, which is the ultra high definition, and then in the middle they also have the Vipers. And so what I would recommend, if you don't own a pair of binoculars, I would recommend going to get you a 12 power Viper range. That price range for those, and we're talking Vortex, but Loophole has theirs, and Burris has theirs. All of these have those middle range binoculars that you can go and get. And guys, they do a great job. I mean, they really are clear. You can see, a long ways with that magnification. And I'll admit, when you get up to the, like Chad, you got the Razors and whatnot. Like when you get up to those, they're, the definition definitely is a little bit better. But those Vipers they're freaking good. They're really good. And so, again, for the price range, the most bang for your buck, you're a Western hunter that just want a binocular to do everything, I would look at those 12 power binoculars, or possibly even the 18s. But then you're getting too heavy and it's hard to carry them around. So just a binocular that would do everything for you. I would say the 12 power binoculars, around the Viper range from Vortex.
So when I first really got into hunting, honestly, I went and bought the Vortex Diamondbacks 10x42s.
Mm-hmm.
You can get those at Cabela's, Bass Pro for especially around Christmas time, for $200-$300.
Yeah.
And what's great about those is they're still Vortex. They still have the same warranty,
the VIP warranty.
And honestly, I ran those for a long time.
Yeah.
Just doing standard big game hunting. And then, I finally got to the point where, hey, I wanted something a little bit better. I'd be sitting next to you. You'd be like, oh, that's a great bull. It's this or that. And I'm like, I can't see that.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah, I can tell it's a bull. It's a big bull. But, this is about as much as I could see. So, so I'm running the 12x50s right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I carry in my bino harness.
Yeah.
And that's something, too. Bino harnesses are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Get yourself, I think most binoculars, at least I know with Vortex, will come with at least a basic bino harness when you buy them. But that's something also worth investing some money in your optics. Keeps them safe, keeps them close to you, readily accessible. Also, typically you can get a different attachments for, rangefinders and things like that. But that's a big thing too, is once you do start investing in these optics, make sure you take good care of them and they'll last you forever.
Yeah, I just pulled up your Diamondback 10x42s on Optics Planet. You can actually buy them for $150 right now on Optics Planet.
Yeah,
it's a great bino. I mean, it really is, and
no brainer.
Yeah, like that. That's great. It's a great entry level binocular. $150, most people can afford that. So you will find, like you're saying, Chad, you'll find that if you're looking a long ways, the guys with you that have higher power binoculars or a higher range, they're probably going to see it and you're not. But it's still for 150
Yep.
bucks. That's really
No,
not that
it's a
bad.
no-brainer. I mean, it's amazing that Vortex does that, honestly, because
It is.
I think even for that price, it's pretty good glass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the
It
thing
is.
is like the
So
glass on it really is still HD glass. So it's still
it
really
is, yeah.
good glass. It's just not the clarity that you're going to get with the higher ones. And obviously, this is only a 10 power versus the 12 and 15 and 18 power. But
Mm.
hey, I'm a guy, and this is something that people need to know. And if you follow the podcast, you know I'm a 10 power guy. I have carried a 10 power binocular with me all the time. My reasoning is I've got my 10 power binoculars, but I also have my spotting scope sitting right there as well. And I actually prefer all glass with my 10s till I find something. And when you have really good glass, you can pick stuff out underneath trees and whatnot. I'll find something and then I'll throw my spotting scope on my tripod and look out, with my spotting scope. I'm hoping that getting the 15s will fix that and I don't have to do that anymore. But that's
Yeah.
to be seen.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a good point. When you're backpacking or hiking through the mountains, sometimes you don't want to have to carry both of those with you.
Right.
And so I think that's a good segue into spotting scopes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about, spotting scopes. And there's so many different ones out there. And when I look at a spotting scope online, the first thing that pops out to me is all of the numbers.
Yeah.
You start looking at these spotting scopes and it's like and there's a bunch of numbers just after that. So maybe, we're talking, even this kind of digresses a little bit back into the binoculars, the 12 by 50s or the 18s or the 10s. Maybe let's go through a little bit on how do you decipher
Yeah.
what they're talking about when you're looking at that?
No, that's a great question for someone that's getting into this. They're going to look at that and it probably is going to scare the crap out of them because there's just all these numbers and what do I do with all of these numbers? So, and we've been doing that this podcast already. So we're talking about these 10 by 42s. What does that mean? So the first number that you're going to come to is the 10. That's the magnification on it. So it's a 10 times zoom. Think about a camera. It has a 10 zoom. That's kind of what that is. It's a 10 times magnification looking out, at the animal. And so there's a 10 power, 12 power, 15 power, 18 power. And going back to the Eastern guys, they may even want just an 8 power, an 8 by 42 binocular that they're just, they're sitting in the tree stand looking through the trees, where you don't really have to look that far because it's so thick out there. So, and I know I'm generalizing, you Eastern guys, don't hate me. I know I'm going to get an email from a couple of you that are telling me that there's mountains out east that you can go up on and look out. But anyways, I digress. So that's that first one is the power. Then the 42, or like Chad said, his are 12 by 50s. And that is the size of the objective lens on the outside of the binocular, on the outside of the spotting scope. So that's going to be the size of that in millimeters. And what that means is the smaller size, so say it's 42 millimeters, that's going to allow different levels of light in through that glass on the outside. There's a lot that goes into that as well, and I know the haters out there are going to be like, well, that really doesn't make that big of a difference. It's more the tube size. It's both, to be honest with you. And so, yeah, if you have a bigger objective lens, then it allows more light to come into the optic itself and be able to see out there. So what you'll see, like on a binocular, 50 and 56, 56 are about the biggest that you're going to see on a binocular, mainly for weight, but that's just about as much light as you need for that magnification. The higher the magnification you go, the more light you need coming into your eye. And so, Chad, you're talking about these spotting scopes, and there's so many numbers on it. I'll just go through my spotting scope to give an example, and all the other spotting scopes are going to be the same way. So I have the Razor HD from Vortex. It's a 27 to 60 by 85. So that could be confusing. So 27 to 60 magnification. So it's adjustable. So on the eyepiece, I can spin it, and it'll go from a 27 magnification, which we just talked about, all these binocular magnifications, right? So the highest we ever got to on that was 18. Well, this one starts out at 27, and it goes all the way up to 60 magnification. The 85 is the millimeter of the bell. And I always call it a bell just because that's old terms. It's what we call them. Anyways, 85 millimeter. So it allows more light to come in as you crank up that magnification on that spotting scope. 85 is a really good number for that. Vortex also has some 65s that are a little bit smaller, a little more lightweight. And Chad, you kind of talked about this. Like when you go backpacking, you really don't want to
Yeah.
take two optics, right? It's heavy. Well, you can actually do
Yeah.
like a 65 or even I think Swarovski has a
I think
50.
Vortex makes a compact 56.
Is it a 56? Okay, yeah, I knew there was a smaller one than
Yeah, for
that.
12 to 39 by 56. They make a compact on that.
And those are so sweet for backpacking. They really are, because you can have that. It doesn't weigh that much in your backpack, and then when you get in those positions, you can throw that spotting scope and really zoom in on those animals. And again, you're going to be limited because it is just a 56 bell, and so it's only going to allow so much light in there. Swarovski actually has a 95 millimeter bell. It almost looks ridiculous on the end of a spotting scope, but it does allow so much more light in there. And then they also have their BTXs, which is kind of like a binocular attachment that you can put to the spotting scope. It makes it look so you can look through both eyes and then through the spotting scope. So you get all the magnification, but then it's almost it's as comfortable as looking through a set of binoculars. So sorry, long answer to a short question, Chad, but that's kind of what all those numbers mean when you're looking at these spotting scopes.
So when you talk about light coming in, that's going to be the bigger the objective, probably the better that optic's going to perform in low light situations, right?
It is, but you got to be careful because still quality of glass comes into play here. So there's a couple other
Okay.
brands out there, and I won't name them because they're not good brands, but they have spotting scopes, they have binoculars that have these huge bells on it, huge objective lenses on them. But once it gets dusk or early mornings, you can't see crap with them, and that's
Oh,
just
yeah.
because of the quality of the glass. So be a little bit careful with size means more light and you can see better. It's a little combination of glass and the size.
So I think one suggestion you'd given me, this was a couple years ago when I was looking, because I had a more of a compact um, set a spotting scope that I was running, and I found though that I was rarely ever packing it with me in my backpack.
Hmm.
And so when I was looking to upgrade that, I ended up going with the larger set because I said, hey, if I'm ever going to have this, most likely it's going to be in a situation where I've got it either in the back of a truck or in a side by side. Weight's not an issue,
Yeah.
but I'm going to want that power magnification. And that's why I upgraded the 12 by 50s to carry with me, because I felt like that gave me the best optic to pack around with me. And then I have the bigger spotting scope to have, not necessarily planning on throwing in the backpack.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like on our elk hunt in Colorado, where we're hiking back up in there, and I know we have llamas, but they carry all of our camp and our food and all that stuff, and so all of our camp or all of our gear is on us. You don't really want to pack a spotting scope clear up in there. One set of binoculars is really all you want to
No.
take. I mean, if you take anything, and this is a recommendation I have for everybody listening, if you're going to take anything and you're kind of challenged with weight, take your tripod. Take a tripod that you can put your binoculars on versus taking the spotting scope. So if you're debating whether, should I take that spotting scope?
Yep.
And I mean, obviously you got to take a tripod with you to take the spotting scope. But yeah, make sure you have that tripod with you. So yeah, the hunts like that where we're backpacking in, you're right. I mean, a 12 power or 15 power binocular, albeit a little bit more heavier than my 10s, but you can use that optic for everything. You can go sit on the top of that ridge that we sat on, and I saw you and Troy down there hunting, and an
Yep.
elk walking right next to you that you guys couldn't see. Or if you're in those thick trees,
Yep.
those 12s are still going to work.
Yeah, and what's the great thing about a good bino harness too, going up to a couple of different sizes in those, you're not going to notice the weight difference on your
Right,
chest
right.
as much as you are that heavy spotter in your backpack. Even though we had llamas on that trip, we were still weight limited, on
Hmm.
what we could bring in. So, we were each still monitoring really closely what we were packing in and that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
so definitely good things to look at. I typically use my spotter, when I'm on hunts with my kids or I'm not too
Hmm.
far from the truck and I'm able to set up on the tripod and I want to be able to glass longer distances. And then, like you said, bring in a good lightweight tripod with something like an outdoorsman.
Yep.
And maybe we should talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of adapters out there that will allow you to physically attach your binoculars just like you would your spotting scope to your tripod.
Yeah, I was just editing our New Zealand video, and you're going through your gear, and you talked about your outdoorsman's. So when we say outdoorsman's, guys, it's this cool little post that you put on, that you attach onto your tripod through your Arca Swiss or whatever kind of a tripod you have, attachment there. It goes right onto your tripod, and then there's a post that goes on your binoculars. It just threads into the front of them, and then you can push it onto there, and I mean, it's solid. It holds your binoculars perfectly. And there's a couple other brands out. Vortex makes one very similar to the Outdoorsman's, but I mean, I've tried 4 of them, and the Outdoorsman's by far for me is the best. It's the most stable. It's bulletproof. It's amazing. So it's a game changer, guys. It is something that has changed my hunting experience completely. I used to be the guy that would walk around and you pull the binoculars, but when you're just holding them up with your hands, you can only look through them for so long, and then you got to put them down because that's not our normal position. But if you can throw your binoculars on a tripod, you can look all day long. And I've sat there for hours. I'll give credit to a really good friend of mine, Trevor Hunt. No relation, but he's the guy that I guide with, and he's the one that talked me into that, and so he's shown me, and man, we'll be out there glassing and glass for 2 hours and finally see an ear underneath a tree. You would never see that if you're holding up your binoculars with your hands, but when they're on a tripod, it makes all the difference. And Chad, you and I have been hunting now for how many years, and have you ever seen me without a tripod?
Nope. Every time you've got one in your pack, I can pretty much rely on it. So,
yeah.
But no, it's true. I mean, and you get a lot more stable of an image. It's amazing how much more you can pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And those who have been hunting, there's a term out there called gridding. So when you're glassing a hillside, you typically will kind of glass that hillside in a grid. And actually, this past weekend, I was listening to Remy Warren's podcast, and he did a phenomenal one on gridding. So if anybody really wants to learn more about that, I'd suggest to go over and listen to what he had to say. But when you're sitting on a tripod, it really allows you to kind of slowly scan, every inch of that mountainside.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, you'd be surprised what you're able to pick up, or as you pan back, what changes over the course of an hour. I mean, animals are constantly moving, and I would say I've always thought it'd be really cool to like look at a mountainside and just imagine that mountainside completely void of vegetation, and how many animals are up there. Kind of like a snapshot. Like all of a sudden the trees are gone, there's all the animals, trees are back.
Yeah.
And I bet you there's so much that we don't see. So whatever gives you that best, solution to being able to pick up on those and watch and see what happens. And it's always cool too. You get something in the spotter, and you're maybe with somebody who's not hunting, or maybe you're not hunting and someone else is, and hey, come look at this. I got this pulled up in the spotter. Come over, and it's already set. You just look in there or in the binos, and boom, you're right on it.
Well, that's actually really good. Another segue, but kind of something else we got to talk about. We're talking about accessories with the Outdoorsman's, but also, like a lot of times I'll take my spotting scope just for videoing. And so I use my phone scope on my spotting scope basically all the time. Well, I mean, my phone scope is my phone case. I mean, it just is what it is now. I always have my phone case on. But then I just throw that on my spotting scope. And then like you're saying, when you want to show somebody, man, you're locked down on that tripod. It's on the screen on your phone. Our phones are huge nowadays. And you can see it. Plus then you can take that video back and use it for YouTube or social media or whatever. But and we're talking about the quality of glass and things like that. I will tell you guys, you will notice a difference if you're on a lower end spotting scope versus a higher end spotting scope. And same with binoculars if you're trying to use a phone scope through it for digiscoping. So Vortex makes a lower end. I think is it the Crossfire? What's their very lowest end? Do you remember, Chad, off the top?
Crossfire knows us on the rifle scopes. I still think it's a Diamondback. Don't they have a Diamondback version of the spotting scope?
It is. So it is a Diamondback. I just pull it up here on their website. So it is a Diamondback. I mean, it's still HD glass, but you will notice a difference if you're videoing through that versus videoing through my Razor. The clarity is just a little bit different there. Now I'm going to go back to your first question that you talked about, Chad, with the binoculars. Like, what would I recommend for somebody that just wants to, if you want a spotting scope and you never had one before, but you want to start using one, but you don't want to break the bank with going with the Razor or with going with the BTXs from Swarovski or whatever. I Similarly, I would recommend going with that Viper range from Vortex because it's really a good price. It's not going to break your bank. But the glass on that is pretty dang amazing. And similarly, you can video through that and still get really good quality video. Your 4K camera on your phone is still going to be video in 4K. It's not going to dilute that very much at all. And so I would recommend, if you're going to look at getting a spotting scope, I would go with that Viper range. And then also from the sizes, I would probably go with the biggest that you possibly can with the Vipers, unless you're just going to use it for backpacking. But they have a 20 by 60 by 85 that would be it's an amazing spotting scope that would do everything that you would ever need it to do. You would never need to upgrade from that spotting scope. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, my chair.
Well, and I think since we're talking about spotting scopes and binoculars, I think we should just go right into the Digiphone adapters, because those are really the two optics that we've got that we're going to talk about that are related to those.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned, and you've done a video actually in the past on YouTube where you did a comparison on a few of these. So, you run the phone scope. I think you have the mag view as well.
I do.
There's a few other ones out there. All In.
Mm-hmm.
Outdoorsman's actually makes their own now.
Yeah.
There's a few others that are some options. So, I've got my main experience I have is with the MagView. I've had that one for a number of years now, and it kind of just comes down to, they all have their little pros and cons, and it really kind of comes down to how they attach, what kind of attachments you have to bring with you or have on your phone. And so the reason I went with the MagView, because the attachment stays on the device.
Yeah.
And then, I just have a simple magnet plate that goes on the back of my phone cover, which is cheap and easy to swap between phones. So as you're upgrading phones and as you're changing things in and out, that works out really well for me. But the phone scope's also got a great setup, and All In is really coming on pretty hot. They've got some good products out there as well.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because, I remember us talking about it, and you said, where you change phones so much, it makes sense for you to have the MagView. That way you're not buying a new case however often, every year, that you're getting a new phone. For me, I keep a phone for quite some time, at least 2 or 3 years. So it's not as big of a deal to buy a case. I will say one thing about the phone scope is, like, when you buy a phone, what's the first thing you do? You go buy a case, right? and if you're going to buy a good rugged case that's going to protect your phone, honestly, you could probably pretty much buy a phone scope case for that. But I get that. And the MagViews is so simple, especially now that you can charge through their magnet plate on the back. I think that's a game changer for them.
Yeah, they came out with the wireless.
For the wireless. Yeah, because at first it didn't have that, and that was kind of a pain in the butt. But it's easy to use, super easy to use. The All In is very easy to use. Bruce out to New Zealand, that's what he had was All In. And he just snapped it on here in town. I know that old Shed Crazy, that's what he's using. But yeah, I'm just a phone scope guy. Everything's moved to magnetic, so now the phone scope is all magnetic as well. It's just honestly, whatever brand you like, I think you're going to be happy with either one nowadays. But they are amazing, guys. Even if you don't have a YouTube page, you're not a content creator, I think that you should have some kind of digiscoping thing that you can do if you've got a spotting scope or a binocular. I mean, it's so fun to go back and watch those videos. How often do we do that, Chad? We're always going back and watching those videos.
Oh, well, and not even the video, just the photos. I mean, it's so cool to be able to, you've got a nice bull in the spotting scope at 1,000 yards or 800 yards away. There's no way you're going to be able to sit back and zoom in with your camera and take a picture of that guy, but through your spotter you could.
Yeah.
So being able to have that attach on there and watch him and take some cool pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that a lot in New Zealand. We took a lot of photos, a lot of stuff through our binos and through our spotting scopes, which I think really just captures the memories.
It
of
does.
the hunt and things like that. And you could bring this up and say, hey, yeah, I glassed this guy up at 800 yards, and then you proceed to tell your story, but you kind of got a before photo that you could take, which they really allow you to do that. Obviously, it's not something that you would need to invest in right away.
Right.
So if you're just getting into this, don't sweat that too much.
Right.
But as you start wanting to be able to capture some more of this stuff, or you know, great thing to ask for Christmas or Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
It's another little just piece of arsenal to have in your pack when you're out there. The first one that I bought, I don't even remember the name of it. It was a universal adapter, and but the same thing. It was very similar to the phone scope. You had to have a specific case for that, but the adapter was nice because it was universal to all the different optics. And to be honest, I didn't hardly ever use the thing. I think
Yeah.
I maybe used it once
Yeah.
ever. Just didn't really catch on to it for a while. But then once I switched over to MagView, I found myself definitely using it a lot more.
Yeah, it's like the first thing I do when I hop out of a vehicle now is just I want to have that memory, and some people
Yeah.
think it's silly. I've got buddies that are old school and they don't even own it. They have the spotting scopes and binoculars, but they don't own the digiscoping stuff, and they think it's silly that I hop out and that's the first thing I do is I throw my phone scope onto my spotting scope and hit record or hit take pictures. I want to be able to go look, and maybe it might be a little bit of the guide in me because you're always wanting to score an animal or go back, and be able to show people. Like, when I'm guiding people, I'll say, hey, here's this deer. This is one I saw in your area that we're looking at. We can go after, and you can look to make sure it's the one that you want. You can really zoom in on it, not only with your spotting scope, but then you take the picture. Then you can zoom in even more on your phone and be like, okay, does it have that kicker on that right side, or does it have that inline on the left side, or whatever the case may be. Like it just allows you to really get in deep on these things and really be able to see like what you're looking at. So it might be a little bit of the guy that's kind of coming to me on that, but it's what I do. It's the first thing I do when I hop out of the vehicle is throw the spotting scope up with the phone scope on it. So, hey,
Yeah. Yep. I know. I get out of the truck and I'm scanning the hillside, and I look back and Taryn's getting the tripod out and this and that. So,
yeah, I'm
but
kind of a
you're
tripod
converting me
junkie.
over. I'm getting better at it.
You are, yeah. Once you do it, once you're able to see it and capture those things, it's hard not to.
Yeah.
It only takes a few seconds to throw those tripod legs out and start looking at those things. So one thing, did you see what Outdoorsman just came out with?
Huh.
So they came out with a thing called, oh crap, I can't remember. I'm going to look it up while I'm talking about it. But it's basically this thing that goes on your tripod that will hold your binoculars or your spotting scope when you're not using them on top of the tripod. So it's like I think they call it the holster or something like that. But that way your binoculars or your spotting scopes right there, readily available. You don't have to like be drop anything in the dirt or anything like that. It just kind of clips on, and then you can just switch them out really quick. Have you seen that?
Huh. No, I haven't. So it's like a little harness you can kind of put on there and drop them.
Yeah, like it just holds it
You
there
switch back
for
and
you.
forth between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can switch back and forth. Let's see here. Their post says, let's see, yesterday we released our brand new tripod holster. So yeah, they said the feedback was amazing on it. It's simple to swap between binoculars, spotting scopes, cameras, and more, all while keeping your pricey optics and camera equipment off the ground and safely secured. So yeah, it's called the tripod holster. But basically, you just clamp. It's the thing on one of your tripod legs, and you just slide your binoculars or your tripod or your spotting scope in there while you have the other one up on top, looking through it. So yeah, it's
Interesting. Huh.
it is pretty dang cool. I'm sending it to you on Instagram right now, but
Okay.
I'm gonna get one of those ordered because I'm always going back and forth between the two because I've always used my binoculars and my tripod. Now again, if I switch to the 15s, it may not be an issue, but yeah, just a cool little product for you guys out there. Again, nothing you have to buy now. We're mainly doing this for people that are new into this, but anyway, it's just something cool.
Oh, yeah, cool. I'll check it out.
So,
let's switch gears a little bit, and
okay.
I think before we get into rifle scopes, because those can be pretty complicated. Let's just touch on rangefinders real quick.
Okay.
There's not too much there with those.
Yeah.
Well, and then we'll kind of switch gears and jump over.
So rangefinders can be a little bit more complex. um, depending on what you want to do with it. So I put up a video on our
Yeah.
YouTube channel that said, do you really need a 4,000 yard rangefinder? Because so Vortex
Yeah.
makes a rangefinder. It's the Razor HD 4,000. And it's the one that I use mainly. How
Yeah,
often
I'm
do
looking
I?
at it right here. $800.
Yeah, yeah, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
But okay, so do you really need that? No, you don't. That's basically my answer in that video. Like, you don't even have to watch that video. Please do watch that video. I'd appreciate any views on that. But
Yeah.
do you really need that? You don't. If you're a long range shooter and you're going to be shooting out to a mile, yeah, you do need that. And don't kill animals at a mile. But if you just want to do, target practicing and whatnot, it's fun. And it does. I mean, I'll be sitting there. I was sitting in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, and I was doing that while we were sitting there, just ranging out to see how far it would go. And I was getting out to 2,500 yards. I'm like, well, it is pretty amazing that it can do that. Do I really need it to do that? No, I don't. And I probably wouldn't spend $800 on a rangefinder. I would find something a little bit more economical. So there's some really cool ones out there that do exactly what you need. Most of them are going to give you ranges. Most of them today are going to give you true trajectory. So back in the day, they were kind of just line of sight, and they wouldn't really adjust if you're looking up or if you're looking down a mountain. Nowadays, all of them are going to give you true ballistic range on the object that you're ranging. Or there's a mode in there that you can set to either do true ballistic ranging or line of sight, whatever you want to do. But for the most of us, we're going to do true ballistic range so that we, especially, like our last podcast was on archery and getting addicted to archery. And when you're either doing a attack shoot or you're hunting with a bow, you want to make sure that every time you're hitting that, it's giving the range that you've sighted your bow into. And that's usually going to be that true ballistic range. So most of them have that nowadays. So really what you're going to want to... Oh, go ahead.
I run the Leupold full draw.
Yeah.
And that one is set up a little more specific for archery, where it'll allow me to set it to that mode, and then it'll compensate for the angle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, those who shot a lot of archery, especially 3D shoots, things like that, it's nice because I don't have to do the math to say, okay, well, I'm 15 degrees. What does that change as far as my yardage goes?
Mm-hmm.
The yardage that I'm getting feedback from the rangefinder is exactly what I need to set it at.
Yeah.
And so then that feeds off, like what you're saying. It goes to the same thing with true ballistic range. There's rangefinders out there that will allow you to even put in the ballistics of your bullet.
Yeah.
And it'll give you your holdover, give you all of that you want in there to those different animals.
Well, and SIG even, actually there's a couple of them now. I think Burroughs has one too, but there's quite a few of them now that the rangefinder will Bluetooth to your rifle scope, and
I've got that. I've got the SIG BDX on one of my rifles, and to be completely honest, I don't think I've ever used it. You would have to have everything set up because you got to have your phone on because your phone's the in between.
Yeah.
Because it has to calculate altitude, and so they use your phone to figure out what your altitude is. And then, you'll range find in that. And then, yes, it'll then translate over into your scope to give you it has a little blue dot that shows up, and that's where you hold. So it's amazing technology. I mean, it's super cool. I've never been in a situation yet hunting with a rifle that I've needed that, but I do have it. I've got a SIG BDX. What's actually the Kilo rangefinder, which is great as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing. Like you said, it's amazing technology, and to be able to do that. So when we were hunting in Colorado a few years ago, my cousin actually Sarah's cousin actually had that on his, and he used it, and it was beautiful. I mean, he center punched that deer. It was a beautiful deer, the biggest deer he's ever shot too. And basically, my brother-in-law ranged it. It put that blue dot on his crosshair. He put that blue dot right behind the front shoulder and pulled the trigger, and it worked beautifully. So very cool technology. I mean, definitely there are some things that you have to do to, like you said, you have to have your phone there and whatnot, but man, it was pretty dang cool. So you can get kind of crazy with these rangefinders, and I mean, you can do a lot of things, but what I'm going to say for most people that are rifle hunters or archery hunters is find you one that, again, that's in that middle range. So Loophole makes one that's a 3000. Vortex makes a Viper 3000. Usually what you can bank on with with those numbers. So the 3000 is what they're saying the yardage is on that rangefinder. Now that's at a stationary object, a stationary reflective object at that distance. That's the max they ever, they get with that. You're not going to get that on a deer or an animal.
No.
Basically what you're going to do is cut that in half. And so if you get a 3000, so like I say the Viper HD 3000, basically you're getting a 1500 yard rangefinder. Well, guys, you're almost out to a mile at that point, So that's a really good range for rifle hunters. You're not going to, hopefully not shooting past that. That's still fun target range with a rifle. But then it's also a compact one and an easy one to use that you can use for archery. You can get it for, I think they're like $250, $200, something like that. So not going to break the bank, but it's going to do everything that you need it to do. Again, you can go up above that. You can get the Loophole one that shows you your holdover and or your where your arrow is going to go, or you can go the 4,000 yard one with the Vortex. There's other brands out there. Leica makes a really good rangefinder. That's what most of the guys in New Zealand were using, were Leica rangefinders. So my father-in-law lived and died by. There a bunch of different ones. So, but if you want to just get a good one, I would find one of those 3,000 yard ones, a Loophole, a Burris, a Vortex, and go with one of those.
Yeah. I'm looking on Shields right now. They got the SIG Kilo 2800 on here on sale for $189.
Oh, wow.
Amazing deal.
Yeah. That's an amazing rangefinder.
$400 rangefinder.
Yeah.
Like you said, they got the Leicas on here. The Vortex Viper HD 3000 is $400.
That's more than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But still a great rangefinder.
The Diamondback 2000 is $299.
I've actually got that one.
That's HD glass as well.
So I actually use that one for golf. Vortex actually just came out with a whole golf line, but that's actually my golf rangefinder is that one, and it's great. That thing works flawlessly. It does amazing. So there's a few other things you can use these for rather than just hunting.
You gonna enter the ballistics of your 7-iron in there?
I should. That's what we need to get next is enter your ballistics and tell you what club you should be using.
Yeah, you just click and say, okay, use your 6-iron at 80%.
Yeah. I actually,
there you go.
There is a video
that I feedback to Vortex on that.
Yeah, I did a video on a comparison of those rangefinders too. So if you guys are listening to this and want to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of those rangefinders, those, I don't want to say lower, but they are lower rangefinders from Vortex. I did do a comparison video of those, but they're amazing, guys. They did a great job. They did everything that I wanted them to do, and yeah, if you're not shooting over a mile, a lot of these are going to work great.
Yeah, you're not going to go wrong with any of those.
Right.
So, all right, let's get into scopes, rifle scopes, because this is one that I definitely feel inadequate on, really being knowledgeable about scopes, because there's so much out there and so many things that you see guys do and you're like, what are they doing? They're dialing this or they're dialing that.
Yeah.
I'm used to put a scope on there and, I rarely take long shots anyway. And so I really haven't had much need, but recently I've kind of been getting a little bit more into some higher quality rifles and of course wanting to outfit those with some higher quality scopes, just have a better setup.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had a lot of discussions with you on, hey, what should I put on here? Or what should I do for this? Because I think you can get, a lot of guys will go in there and say, oh yeah, I want a scope that'll let me shoot out to 800 yards. Well, you gotta be careful because if you put something on there with too high of a power, then it really messes up those shorter range shots that you're gonna have.
Right.
It's really tough to dial those back in there. And because if you think about it, I don't know, I would venture to guess the vast majority of people are taking animals at 200, 300, 400 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a super long range scope on there, then you're going to be kind of hindering yourself a little bit on more of the common shots that you may be taking.
Yeah, it depends on which scope you have. Like I had the highest one that you could have from Vortex. It was the Razor. Gosh dang it, what was it? Let me pull it up here so I'm not misspeaking. The Razor HD Gen 2, is what it was. They actually came out with the Gen 3, which is, I did a video on the comparison of those too, guys, if you want to watch that video. And it was the lowest it would go was a 6 power, but it still was great for the 200, 300 yard shots. If you went down to 100, it was, I mean, you were looking, you could see every little hair, every little tick on that deer at that point. But so to your point, yeah, I mean, you kind of got to know what you want to do with the scope.
Well, yeah, because if you get too high of a power too, it's tough. I know some people struggle to find animals in their scope.
Mm-hmm.
They'll find them on the binos, they'll get ready to get set up, and they're looking all around, trying to find them, and they're zoomed in too far, and they have a hard time, locating them as much.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, another thing you're going to run into a high power scope is going to be heavy too. Most of those are going to be are going to be very heavy. Now there's some that are coming out. Vortex did come out with a Razor LHT. That's actually what I run on my 28 Nosler, and it's a lightweight, high powered scope. But the majority of them, like those Night Forces, I don't know if Bruce had that on his, but Chris had a Night Force on his rifle, and man, that thing was heavy.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's not one that you're going to want to throw over the shoulder and climb up a mountain with. I mean,
no. So
yeah,
with rifles,
when we talk, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say with rifle scopes, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood the numbers on that one as well, because you're gonna look at a rifle scope and you're gonna see all these different numbers and letters and all that stuff. So I just really quickly want to go through that, and then maybe we can kind of dig into some of the questions that you have, Chad. But so similar to a spotting scope, it's going to give you a range for magnification with the first numbers. So like my Razor HD LHT, it's a 4.5 to 22 by 50. So it's 4.5 to 22 power with a 50 millimeter bell on the end of it. And then you'll have other ones that are a 44 millimeter or a 42 or even that Razor HD Gen 2 that I had was a 56 millimeter. So I had to do taller rings, and it just kind of messed up my whole groove on shooting that gun. I like a scope that's closer to the barrel, closer to the action when I shoot it, and so I don't want too big of an objective lens on it so that I don't have to lift it up too high. But that's what those numbers mean. So like 4.5 to 22 by 50 or a 5 to 25 by 50, it's 5 to 25 power with a 50 millimeter bell on it. So just want to make sure that everybody knew what those numbers were. Then you'll see other letters afterwards. So there'll be an FFP, which is a first focal plane. So there's a first focal plane and a second focal plane, and we can get into those if we want to. But you'll also see MOA, you'll see MRAD, you'll see MIL. Those are different adjustments that you can make for elevation or windage, depending on which system that you want to use. Personally, I'm an MOA guy, and again, we can get into more of these if we want to. But it's your adjustment ranges to be able to adjust either elevation up or down or windage left or right to adjust for the distance you're shooting or the windage that you're currently experiencing. So just want to make sure that everybody was understanding what those letters and numbers were.
Yeah, because I'm on Vortex's website right now. So for example, if I click on the Razor HD Gen 2s, you've got the 4.5 to 27 by 56, and then you have different reticle options in there as well. So you've got the MOA, you've got the MRAD, you've got I don't know what these other ones are. Horus.
So the Horus.
I'm sure what that is.
So when you're looking at different reticles, so the Horus is going to have a lot more lines in it. So all of these the majority of these reticles, even on an adjustable windage or adjustable elevation scope, is going to still have the lines in there for adjustments. So back in the day, I used to shoot, and I still have it. It's a Zeiss Conquest. It has no elevation turret on it or anything like that. It just has the lines in it. And I knew that so well. I shot a deer at 660 yards with that thing just because I knew which line to hold it on and being able to hit at that distance. So the Horus and they have a couple other ones like the Tremor and stuff like that. It's just going to have a different view. The reticle is going to look a little bit different as far as those lines and stuff that are in the scope, in the glass.
So it kind of depends on what you want to see once you're looking through there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk real quick about MOA versus MIL.
Okay.
Because this is something I just learned a couple years ago, and I didn't really know that much about it. and I actually stumbled upon it because I had bought a rifle scope that was a good deal. It was on sale. Got it, then realized it was mills,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, oh, okay. So I've got to figure out what mills are. Um, so let's get into that a little bit because I think that's important when you are picking out a rifle scope, um, because when you're in the field
Mm-hmm.
and people, you're going to have to calculate for your ballistics of your bullet, what those are, so you can make those adjustments.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So it really depends on who you are. So if you talk to a military guy, they're always going to talk about, MIL or MRAD. That's kind of the system that they use in the military, and so that's what they're used to. Some use MOA. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of what each one is, and I'm definitely more familiar with MOA than I am the others. But basically, what those systems are is it's a system that you can use that's going to give you the trajectory of that bullet. And so basically, think about it like this: like your sight tape on your bow. If you're adjusting that sight tape, you have a different sight tape on your bow than I have on mine. Just like every single bullet's going to fly different, every gun's going to shoot a little bit different speed, and so you're going to adjust MOA specific to the gun that you're shooting, the caliber that you're shooting, the distance that you're shooting, bullet you're shooting, all that. So all that's going to go into it, including elevation and temperature and stuff like that. So these systems are all very the same, very similar in how they do. The calculation is just different. And so what we do nowadays, they used to have to do this on a paper chart, which was terrible. Nowadays, we have an app in our phone that we can plug this stuff in. So if you're using MOA or you're using MRAD or whatever your MIL or whatever you're using, there's going to be an app in your phone, and you can plug in all of that information that I just talked about: caliber, bullet, speed, elevation, temperature, barometric pressure, all those things that are going to go into what's going to impact the trajectory of that bullet. You can plug all that into your phone, and it's going to give you the certain number of MOA or mil clicks or whatever to be able to adjust that elevation turret on the top of your scope. So MOA, the reason I've gone with it is, well, a couple reasons. And I'm speaking of this, I'm not a complete expert in this. I wish that I had my brother-in-law, Jed, or my good friend, Russell Platt, here with me, because they know this stuff inside and out. So they're a big reason why I chose MOA. But for me, it made sense because I could really compare it to inches. Pretty much one MOA was a quarter inch, for me. So, or was an inch for me. Every click was a quarter inch. So it kind of made sense for me when I studied MOA versus MIL or MRAD. And so that's why I went with it. But regardless of what you guys pick or what you have, Chad, basically optimize and utilize your whatever app you use on your phone, put the information in it to your best ability, and then go shoot and make sure that what your phone is telling you is matching with the number of clicks that you're using with the turret on top of your scope.
Yeah, so I was in a hunt this last winter with my son in New Mexico, and he was shooting my 300 Win Mag. We were elk hunting, and what I had done prior to the hunt was I shoot a Federal Premium bullet. So on the back of the box, it gives you the full ballistics of that round.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did is I went on there and I created a cheat sheet. So I think I had him at 100 yards zero on the rifle. That's what we had set up. So then, I knew, hey, if I ranged him a bull at 330 yards, I could look at that cheat sheet, which I had saved in my phone because I was essentially guiding him. I was just there tagging along. And I could tell him, Braden, set your top turret to whatever number it was.
Yep.
And then he would feel confident just holding true on that animal. He didn't have to hold high or low or whatever it was. And so that was something, being prepared going out in the field, knowing, what your ballistics are in your bullet, and knowing what your scope is. Then as long as you have that preparation ahead of time, it really makes it efficient in the field. There's very little guessing involved with that.
It's funny. It's hard to break because, our whole lives, we've always been shooting these scopes that don't have elevation turrets on it. So we did the holdover, the old Kentucky windage on it.
Yep.
And when we had Sarah shooting in New Zealand, Chris dialed up that scope for her. So all she had to do was hold the crosshairs on where she wanted it to hit and pull the trigger. Well, she was still back in the mindset of, I've got to hold over this animal. I'm shooting 500 yards. I've got to hold over this thing. And What'd she do?
Yep.
She
She
shot
had her
over it.
dad talking in her ear.
Yeah, exactly. So
That's what
yeah,
she said. Yep.
it's a hard thing to break, but it makes it so
Yeah.
easy when you can dial that up and again, just hold those crosshairs where you want that bullet to hit and pull the trigger. I mean, again, I think of it very
Yeah.
similar to a sight tape on a bow. It's nice to be able to just crank that thing up to whatever we want and to 90 yards and just put that pin right where I want it to hit and it hits where it hits. I don't have to hold it on its back to hit in its vitals or anything like that. It makes it's a more ethical shot in my mind. Now it's caused people to shoot a really long ways because they're like, oh, well, if I can dial this up at 400 yards, I can dial this up at 1400 yards. Let's just crank that thing up. But,
Yeah.
but it does make a more ethical shot. And I think something else we got to talk about, Chad, is, mounting these scopes that have these turrets. And guys, if you're buying a new scope, a lot of these scopes have turrets on them. I mean, you can buy a very reasonably priced scope with a turret on it. So I would recommend making that investment from the beginning, learning how to create a dope chart, having it on your phone, printing it off, putting it on the stock of your gun, whatever you want to do. But definitely have that on. But, when you're mounting these things, there's some things to think about when you're mounting them is, how to mount them. Do you use a Picatinny rail to mount them? Do you mount them directly to the receiver? What rings do you use or whatever? And what do we recommend? And so, and I'd actually like to pick your brain on this too, Chad, but I'll kind of share my thoughts on this. So one of the cool things about using a Picatinny rail for mounting any scope is a lot of the Picatinny rails have MOA built into them. And so like the rail that's on my 28 Nosler, it's a 20 MOA rail. So that gives me 20 more MOA of adjustment just right out of the box right there for elevation for my scope. So I can really, I can shoot 2,000 yards with that thing pretty handily because that gives me that extra 20 MOA that my scope probably wouldn't have that much adjustment in it. So for me, I mean, it just depends on what you want to do. If you want to get crazy and add some of those stuff to it, you can. You don't have to. You can definitely get rings that will, mount right into your receiver, and some people like that because then it's another piece that's not going to fail. If every piece you add on could fail, there's the potential of failure there. So a lot of people are afraid of adding a Picatinny rail on there because of that's a possibility. But mount it good. Make sure you torque it down to the specs that they're supposed to. But what's that?
Well, the Picatinny rail too also goes right over top of your action.
Yeah.
So some guys don't like when they're loading rounds to have that in the way.
Right.
So but it is nice because it really gives you other options too on how much eye relief you have when you set that scope as well, front to back. So I ventured out and did my first rifle scope mount on my own this past year, and it was interesting. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the different types of rails, the different types of rings that I wanted to get for that. I ended up having to buy a couple little things here on getting that mounted level and things like that too. So most stores, if you buy the scopes, they'll mount it for you.
Yeah.
But if you end up buying something online, they may charge you to do that. And so some of you guys may say, hey, I want to do this myself and learn how to do it. And there's some good resources out there. I don't know if you have any suggestions to people on what to look for or what to do when you want to do that on your own.
Yeah, it's funny because I've never had anybody mount anybody else mount a scope on any of my guns. When I was a kid, except for me, I've mounted every single scope on every single gun that I've ever owned in my life. My father-in-law mounted. So my father-in-law was a gunsmith, so he taught me a lot. But even before him, yeah, I mounted all of my own scopes. So I mean, there's definitely some things that you've got to do. Getting little levels to make sure that your gun's level, having it in a gun vise, and then make sure your scope's level. So you got to have a level on your gun, a level on your scope to make sure that those are perfectly level. Making sure you have a torque wrench to get it to the right torque specs, and that's all in the book. When you buy these scopes, most every scope comes with an owner's manual, and oddly enough, in that owner's manual, it tells you how to mount that scope, and so you can go in there. It'll have you the specs and everything that you need in there to be able to mount it and do it the right way without damaging the scope. Because that's one thing, guys, you can damage the scope. And great if you have a Vortex because you have a VIP warranty and they'll replace it. But there's a lot of companies that won't do that. And so I mean, you gotta make sure and do your research and be careful, but just do the little things. Make sure you do the little things. Like I said, get a gun vise or something that you can put your gun in to make it level. Make sure that your scope's level. Make sure you get the best eye relief you can. And if you can't, like Chad said, get a Picatinny rail. That gives you more adjustment to make sure that eye relief is perfect. Another thing that's something that a lot of people may not think about is the height of it. So we talk about cheek weld on a gun. You really want to have a good cheek weld against your gun. Again, think about archery. You have all those anchor points. Your cheek weld is the same, a very similar thing. You want to have a good cheek weld there. So the height of your optic, you want it to fit your cheek weld, especially if you don't have an adjustable cheek stock. And so you're gonna want to make sure that if you're adding a Picatinny rail and you're adding high rings or whatever, that it's not going to ruin that cheek weld, that you're still going to have a good view through your scope. And so again, those are the little things that you've got to be looking for when you're mounting these scopes. But ultimately, once that scope is mounted, it needs to be comfortable for you in all positions. So when I have a scope that's mounted, I'll lay down with it. I'll go prone and make sure that I can get a good hold with it, good cheek weld, good eye relief. Same with kneeling, same with standing, quick shots, whatever the case may be. Because a lot of times, I mean, you and I walking through the mountains in Colorado in the snow, and an elk walks in front of us. I don't even have a chance to think. I just pull up and have to look through the scope and shoot that elk as he's running past. You want to be able to, have a good eye relief and be comfortable with your scope at that time. So those are some of the few pointers that I would have. Guys, there's a lot of stuff that you can go crazy on with these things. You can spend hundreds of dollars on scope rings. I would recommend getting a good set of rings. Tally rings are my favorite. So I would recommend getting some good rings. You don't have to go crazy with it. Some people hone their scope rings. So basically what that means is they have their scope rings mounted, and they'll actually run a hone kind of like a cylinder in an engine, and making sure that those scope rings are perfectly lined up when they mount their scope, so there's no torque alteration there that could possibly alter their reticle. So I mean, there's a lot that you could do that's getting crazy, but just do the little things, simple things. Get that scope mounted so it's comfortable for you, it's level, and you'll be okay.
Yeah. I learned a few things the hard way. I didn't ruin a scope, thank goodness, but there was definitely things. And first time I took it out to the range, I thought I had it bore sighted, and I went through a number of rounds before I finally got it on paper, but we got there. So definitely learned a little bit by doing it myself, but it's one of those things. You're going to learn a little bit, and then next time should go a little smoother. Hey, one thing we kind of briefly talked about with scopes that I have a personal question about is first focal plane, second focal plane.
Oh yeah, great question.
Because when you're looking at that on the rifles, I mean, a lot of guys are like, "Wait, what's that mean?"
Yeah,
well,
it's something that I didn't even know about until probably 5 or 10 years ago. I didn't, and it's become a bigger thing now that people are getting more into long range. So yeah, they're different focal planes. So when you look through a second focal plane scope and you adjust the magnification on it, the lines in the scope don't move. Now that doesn't make sense, right? I mean, if you're zooming in, there should be some change there, because that the gap between your 100-yard and your 200-yard lines in your reticle should change, because obviously the picture is getting bigger. And so in a first focal plane, when you zoom in, it's going to take that reticle and zoom in. So it's first focal plane because it's moving that reticle with the magnification, so that those lines, either the MOA lines or the MRAD lines, are gonna adjust with your magnification, so that your holdover or whatever is still gonna be correct on that. So if you're shooting a turreted scope, it's not gonna make that big of a difference. You really don't need it, because you're still just lining your centered crosshairs up on that animal and pulling the trigger. So you don't necessarily need a first focal plane scope, but that's going to be the difference between the first focal plane and second focal plane. You'll spend more for the first focal plane, oddly enough, because it does have a little bit more technology in there to adjust the reticle to the magnification.
So what would be the reason behind wanting a second focal plane? I mean, you're saying that basically by the time you zoom in, you're not going to be able to use really those holdover marks anyway, because they're not going to be accurate, right?
Exactly. So like that, going back to that Zeiss Conquest story I told you, that was the most frustrating part when I shot that deer at 660 yards is he's running away from me and he's running further and further away. I can't adjust my magnification because as soon as I adjust my magnification, it's going to take my lines and they're not going to be accurate anymore. So I had to leave it down. I can't remember when I left it. I think it was at 10 or 8. I can't remember. Anyways, I left it at that, and I mean he's just getting smaller and smaller, and I know I could adjust that up, and see him better, but it's gonna alter those lines. So I didn't know what my holdover was gonna be. So really, I mean, second focal planes are gonna be a little bit cheaper, but for the price, I would get a first focal plane every time. I haven't bought in a second focal plane scope in the last 5 to 10 years since I've learned this, just because if there's ever that need to have that adjustment or be able to have that, magnification change or that reticle change with my magnification, I want to have it.
But if you're running a simple reticle, simple crosshair, really it doesn't matter because, like you said, you're going to do the adjustment in your turret.
Yeah.
You're going to hold that thing center anyway. But if you're going to upgrade and get the type of reticle that has the MOAs built into it or things like that, then you're definitely going to want to go first focal plane on that.
Yeah. I was talking to a guy here locally that he's a long range competition shooter. And I said, can I see I want to see your gun. It's just kind of cool to see his gun because that's what he does. He competes in that. And I looked through his scope, and the reticle was the most simple reticle that you could ever imagine. It was just a simple crosshair. That's all it was. Like, oh, I haven't looked through one of those that doesn't have the extra, lines in the reticle, the MOA lines in the reticle. And he's like, yeah, why? I don't need those.
Yeah, and I've always thought that too because I'm like, well, I've always in my mind questioned the accuracy of those because that can vary greatly with the ballistics of your bullet anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I'm like, well, if that's built into the scope, how accurate is that if that, is giving you is it just a generic holdover at those yardages?
It really is. I mean, you have to shoot your gun a lot to know what those holdovers are really going to be. And mine was. I mean, it was on my 7 mag. I put 1,200 rounds for that gun. That was gun I shot so much. I knew where every single one of those lines were. And it's funny that you bring that up. So back in the day, there was these Shepherd scopes. I don't know if you've ever seen Shepherd scopes, but in the reticle they had circles down the line. Down the x-axis basically, and I've seen that.
Have
you seen that? And basically if you hold that up to if what is it if it fits that circle basically, then that's the yardage that you need to shoot it at. And I mean, it was my father-in-law had a couple of them, and I mean it worked pretty well for the guns that he had on it, but again, it's more of a guideline. It's still not going to be nowhere near as accurate as being able to adjust with MOA or MRAD.
Yeah, makes sense.
So anyways, cool things. I mean, it's amazing to see what the technology has done, but again, you can buy these scopes with these adjustments, and they're not a lot of money. And then, another thing, Chad, that a lot of people can do is there's also yardage turrets. So you can reach out to Night Force or Zeiss or whoever.
Yeah, so actually,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so Leupold does those, the CBS styles.
Yep, Leupold does them too.
Yeah,
yep.
So I've actually got that on 2 of my rifles.
Nice.
It's really cool because and they usually include one free with the rifle scope when you order it. So all you do is you jump online, put in the serial number of your scope that you bought, and then you put in the ballistics of the bullet you plan to shoot through that. They'll ask you a few other questions like, hey, what's your average altitude you're going to be hunting at? Because again, it's not exact science, but it's going to be close.
Yeah.
And then they'll send you a custom turret to that bullet. And so what's really convenient is you set that thing to 0. They'll ask you what are you going to zero out to, 100, 200,
right.
You tell it. And then you set it to 0, and then it's it's almost, no brain damage at all. You get out to the field, you literally dial it to 300 yards.
Yeah.
You dial it to 350. It's right on there, and you don't even think about it. So, the only downside is if you ever change bullets or whatever it is, or decide to put that rifle scope on a different caliber, you'd have to order a new turret. But I think they're like $65 or something like that.
Oh,
they don't charge you a lot for them. And it's custom engraved. It says right on the very top, what bullet you sent. the ballistics of that bullet, all of that, and then so it's kind of cool. It's definitely cool technology that Leupold has, and I run that on a couple of my rifles.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I mean, it really is. We talked about it in our last podcast where we're both tinkerers with archery, and so with guns,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the same way. I like to tinker, and so I'm always changing powders or bullets or whatever. And so if you're always changing all the time, well, that's really not going to work. Where MOA is going to work. The other thing that MOA is going to have advantage over is, like you said, you're always changing in elevation of where you're hunting. And so if you and I are laying down,
Yep.
Kodiak Island to shoot a caribou at 50 feet above sea level, I punched in my phone, it already has that. Or if we're hunting in the tops of the Colorado mountains, it's gonna give us the true range. So it's gonna be more accurate to have an MOA scope than it is to have those yardage turrets. But yeah, they're foolproof. They're very simple to use.
Yeah, it's convenience for sure, especially if you're hunting with kids,
Yeah,
things like that. You can just you kind of know where you're going to be roughly, and the elevation. If you're within plus or minus 1,000 feet, it's going to be pretty close.
yeah, for sure.
It's when, like you said, you go from sea level up to 5,000, up to 10,000 feet, then you're going to see quite a bit of difference.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So along the same lines of like kind of what we've talked about so far is like what's a good scope for people to buy. I recommend one scope to most everybody, and that's the Viper PST Gen 2 from Vortex. It's an amazing scope. The glass on it is pretty comparable to my Razor LHT. It's got, you can get MOA or MRAD turrets on it. It's 5 to 25, I think, power. I mean, it really, that's a scope that will do everything. Vortex has also come out with their Strike Eagle line over the past couple of years, a few years, and that's another really good line that has a lot of adjustments to it that you can do all this stuff that Chad and I have been talking about. So if I'm going to recommend kind of an average scope, you want to break the bank, but you want a scope that's going to do everything you want it to do. Those two from Vortex, anyways, scopes are really good, but Zeiss makes a really good scope. Burris is actually really coming out with some really good stuff. And then also, again, you can break the bank and you can go with the Swarovskis, the Night Force, some of those scopes that are a lot more money. And they're pretty amazing. I do have a Swarovski scope, and it's pretty fantastic.
It's not uncommon for your scope to cost more than your rifle.
Yeah, and I would spend more money
So
on optics than a rifle.
definitely keep that in mind. Some guys get hung up on that, and they're like, "Oh, my rifle was $1,000, but my scopes cost me 1,500, or whatever it is." And
Yeah.
it's like, well, but that's doing just as much work.
Yeah, optics
That's
will
what's going to
make or break
the
your
difference.
hunt. For sure. Yeah, they are
Yep.
what make or break it.
Yeah, Leupold's got some great scopes. Like I said, I ran those for a number of years.
Yeah.
Had really good luck with them.
So
They've got a great warranty too.
I back in the day, I
But
lived and died by Leupold. Like I had I called it a Vari X3, I think is what they were called, and they had the VX6 and stuff like that. And man, those scopes they are bulletproof. They are amazing. The glass in them is fantastic. I mean, Leupold makes a very, very good product.
oh yeah, I mean, any of these guys, they're top of the line. That's why you see so many sponsors. These
Hmm.
guys running these different things.
Yeah. Yeah, but you really it's kind of like what we talked about with bows the other day, is just, they're very similar. When you get to the upper end of all of them, they're all very similar. It's really just kind of maybe what you can get a better deal on, who's running the better Memorial Day deal or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't think you can go wrong if you get, a good quality one from any of these brands.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it comes down to what you're hunting, what you're shooting, how far you plan on shooting.
Hmm.
You don't feel comfortable taking those shots over 300 yards. I mean, 12 by or 4x12 or a 4x16 rifle scope, be just fine.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Vortex has got some good crossfires. They got some good Diamondbacks, all under $500.
Yeah.
Um, and then then you can really start going up from there.
Yeah, and that's the thing is start out
Yep.
small. Get used to something and see if you even we all hunt differently, right? And I used to be, like I said, I used to be that guy that would walk around and I would just beat the brush. I would hike mile after mile after mile, and I kind of figured out that I needed to hunt smarter, not harder. And Found out, man, if I spend some money on some really good glass, I can sit on top of this mountain and cover all the area that I would have been walking from this mountaintop, and I can just sit here getting all fat and sassy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I used to be the same way. I mean, I would get very impatient sitting there glassing,
Yeah.
and
You
I would
still
feel
do,
like
and I
I'm
love
ruining
it.
basically my whole day. I need to be out here. I need to be kicking timber. I need to be doing that, and I
Mm-hmm.
was successful doing that as well. But I found, and more so from hunting with you and hunting with better optics, it's amazing what you can see throughout the day
Yeah.
in certain areas. So if you find yourself a good spot in the mountain where you can really glass some good country, you know, sit there for a while, be patient.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got good glass to sit behind, you'll be surprised what you can see and then, make some good game plans on how to get on these animals.
Yeah. I've killed bigger animals since I've started hunting this way than I ever did when I was being the bush. I mean, I killed some cool animals, but
Yeah.
as soon as I started hunting this way, I finally started killing some good, mature quality animals. Because you're right, Chad. If you sit there, you'll be very surprised, and it does test your patience. Because a lot of us aren't very patient, and we want to get up and we want to be moving around. But if you can sit there, be patient, you will be blown away with the things that you see for sure. So
Yeah.
I hope that some of the things we got out of this, and the people that are listening to this understand that you can do these things. You don't have to break the bank to do these things. There's just a few key pieces that are very important. Again, having a good tripod is very important. Having the optic that fits you for what you want to do is also important. So just some of these simple things that you can do to really help you be a better hunter and have more success. And you will. I know you will. You'll have more success if you're able to do some of these things. I've seen it. I witnessed it, not just to myself, but with a lot of the people that I hunt with. So, and we're always here for any questions. If you guys have questions about it, we're research geeks, and we like to look into all this stuff, and so we definitely have experience with a lot of this, and would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on any of these. Did we miss any optics that you wanted to go over, Chad?
No, I think we hit it pretty well on the head as far as, the majority of the things that people are going to be looking at.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So
there's obviously get way more in depth on anything, but depends how long you want to sit here.
yeah, I was gonna say we're pushing the limit on this podcast,
Yeah.
and we may sit down and dig into more of this stuff if you guys wanted us to. We could really give you some nitty gritty on some of the spotting scopes, on some of the rifle scopes, even down to the rangefinders and the impact that they can have on archery or whatever. I mean, we could really get into the nitty gritty, but we really wanted to give you guys kind of an a high level overview of some of the stuff. If you're new into this, what would be good, or if you're just wanting to try something a little bit different, what you could use. So hopefully this answered your guys' questions as well as ours. Again, if you guys do have any more questions, don't be afraid to reach out. You can hit us up on our social media or email. Catch us on our website as well. Also, we have a lot of articles up on our website about all of this stuff. I've done many reviews, video reviews, article reviews on a lot of these topics that we touched on today. So a lot of that information is already out there. So Chad, what other optics are you wanting to get right now? Do you have anything that is like, I don't know, it's in your shopping cart right now?
Not right now. I think I'm pretty well set. I actually just bought a new sight for my bow,
Oh yeah,
so
that's
I'll
right.
tell you about that.
Did you buy
So we
the
talked about that a little bit.
did
So
you buy the one that
not
we were
really
talking about?
optics, but it's a different type of optic, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean it's an optic.
Yeah, yeah. So, but as far as rifles go, or rifle scopes, no, I'm pretty well set. Put on a new one last fall,
Yeah,
and then yeah, I'm running my 12 by 50s, which is kind of my go-to bino right now, and
got your spotting
yeah, I got that
scope.
new spotter too. So
Yeah.
I'm 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 pretty well set right now on
I
what I'm getting. You got anything you got
well,
on the wish list?
one thing I can't. I was so excited when you reached out to me. In fact, I remember where I was at when you were asking me about. I was in Boise, Idaho, where I'm actually going back to this week, and you were asking me like, hey, I need a new set of binoculars and I need a new spotting scope. And I was like, oh yeah, here we go. I got him converted. No, I mean
Yeah.
I just got my those 15s. I want to get those Swaro 15s before this
Oh
fall
yeah.
so that I can I can use them. And I'm still gonna have my 10s and and my spotting scope. I talked about possibly getting rid of those, but I think I'm gonna sell. I've got another pair of 10s that I'm gonna sell and put towards the 15s. But I'm gonna add those to my arsenal just to have. But that's really the only thing that I have. All my guns are pretty well set. With kids, you're always buying new guns and different things. So there's always going to be those things that I'm ordering and whatnot. But no, I think I'm pretty set. But if you guys out there have anything that you're looking to get, we do have quite a few connections through Optics Planet, through Vortex. So if you guys have anything that you're looking, that you're like, hey, I'd really like to get this, love to ask you questions about it, love to get a good deal on it, let us know. We can definitely get you hooked up with some pretty cool stuff. So, Chad, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Appreciate you joining me on the next one. Appreciate all the questions, and I look forward to doing a lot more of these.
Yeah, no, it was good. Like I said, there's a lot of questions that I had, things I've learned over the years, and so kind of good to talk through a few of those.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, man. Well, we will catch you on the next one. We'll see you later.
All right. Okay. See ya.
Okay, bye.